When most people hear about climate change, the first thing that comes to mind are penguins or melting ice. According to a UK news company called The Sun, we know sea levels are rising, but they're rising at different levels around the world. For instance, areas near Antarctica and the USA's west coast have had lower than average sea level rise, but some parts of the world as experiencing the opposite include the USA's east coast, the Philippines, and Indonesia. This is based on satellite data, which has measurements of the sea's surface heights going back to 1993. In Madeline Rubenstein's article, many small island countries are no higher than only a few meters above sea level and are extremely vulnerable to sea level rise. In addition, these states will suffer from a range of other impacts of climate change, including changes in precipitation patterns, groundwater salinization, higher sea surface temperatures, and ocean acidification. As these physical impacts of climate change interact with social and economic vulnerabilities, climate change poses a significant threat to the island's physical, social, and economic well-being. Potential changes in precipitation patterns and sea level rise collectively pose a threat to the island's supply of fresh water, which usually comes from limited groundwater sources and rainfall. A decrease in precipitation would decrease both the amount of rainwater collected directly and diminish the recharge of freshwater lens which supply groundwater. Sea level rise can exacerbate groundwater salinization as salt water penetrates the groundwater and leaves it brackish. These physical impacts resulting from climate change would further compromise as water supply, which is often already strained under the pressures of both domestic and agricultural demands. Sea level rises to two main reasons. The first is thermal expansion. As water gets warmer, it expands. The second is melting ice on land, adding fresh water into the sea. This has a cyclical effect because melting ice also warms up the planet and oceans, causing more ice to melt and boosting thermal expansion.
John Fasulo, a project scientist at Boulder's National Center for Atmospheric Research, said, "Many people understand that sea levels are rising, but imagine the situation comparable to a bathtub gradually filling up. That's not an accurate picture of what's really happening," he has found. There is spatial structure to sea level rise such that some regions experience different rates of rise than the global average, Fasulo said. We're at the early stages of understanding the reasons for that structure. If you are in one of those places that rises quicker, this will likely increase the related impact under climate change. According to an article written by Rebecca Lindsay on climatechange.gov, since the start of the satellite sea level record in 1993, the average rate of sea level has been about 1/8 of an inch, 3.1 millimeter per year. The rising water level is mostly due to a combination of meltwater from glaciers and ice sheets and thermal expansion of seawater as it warms. So why does sea level rise matter? In the United States, almost 40% of the population lives in relatively high population density coastal areas where sea level plays a role in flooding, shoreline erosion, and hazards from storms. Globally, 8 of the world's 10 largest cities are near a coast, according to the UN Atlas of the Oceans. In urban settings along coastlines around the world, rising seas threaten infrastructure necessary for local jobs and regional industries. Roads, bridges, subways, water supplies, oil and gas wells, power plants, sewage treatment plants, landfills, the list is practically endless, are all at risk from sea level rise.